What's good, everybody? It's your boy, the Worthy One, and we back with another one. Today, we're talking about the 7 Hermetic principles and what that means to each one of us as individuals. I'm happy to be back. Man, which is why I had to come back with a part 2 for y'all ASAP. Couldn't wait. But getting right into it, man. I wanted to speak about, as I just said, the 7 Hermetic principles. Now, you may have not heard of these principles, but these are laws that are what I call unwritten, right? Excuse me. And what I mean by that is a lot of us look to religion to tell us about ourselves and about things that, the beliefs that we should hold and certain things like that, without ever understanding that if you simply go outside, you simply go sit in nature, meditate, take a walk, just be outside in the elements, observing the animals and everything like that, then you'll notice certain patterns that's already written in the universe before an author ever wrote them down, which gives the true meaning to what God really is, because I don't think that God wrote down these commandments in a book and handed them to you, right? Man did that. But when you go in nature, something special happens. When you go in nature and you sit there, you observe the movements of the stars, the movements of the sun and the moon, the movements of water, how animals interact with the elements around them, and you'll come to the realization that there are some laws that dictate the movements of these planets and things without having to tell these animals, these planets how to move, or, without having to tell anything what to do. And to get into that, it's simple. It's as simple as observing the sun. If you sit down and you watch the sun every single day, you'll notice that there is nothing telling the sun, you know what, I'm not rising today. You know what, I'm not rising today. I'm not. There's nothing that tells the earth, I'm not spinning on you niggas today. You know what, today I just don't feel like it. I don't got it in me. No, they're all following laws of the universe, unwritten laws, and that's what we're getting into today. So we're gonna go over the law of mentalism. We're gonna go over the law of correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and the law of gender. And in this video, you'll get a deeper insight into each one of these meanings, and hopefully they do something for you to help you understand the world around you in a better way. Pardon me. I had to take a breath because, so many thoughts come to mind when I think about this topic. And one of the main things is just when I finally came to the realization that, that the Most High, the Creator, everything that He wanted you to have, He placed it here for you to observe and to see. So by sitting back and reflecting on things, sort of like, think about Isaac Newton when he came to the realization of what gravity was, when he saw the apple fall from the tree. Then you'll come to realize that everything has a polarity. You'll understand that everyone is connected mentally, right? And to put it in perspective, let's put it in perspective like this, right? And I think I said this in one of my previous videos. I'm an individual, right? I'm one person. But at the same time, I make up a family of other people, right? Brothers, sisters, aunts, and cousins, things like that, right? At the same time, we make up a community or a neighborhood of friends and people around us, neighbors and things like that. And if you want to keep rising the scale up, then you can say that community could turn into a city, which then makes up a state and then makes up the continent, right? So even though at the same time I'm one person and I'm an individual, I'm still a part of a collective. And I think that's the biggest takeaway, understanding that every single thing is connected from a quantum level to a macro level, from the smallest level to the largest thing. We are all connected. Everything that the universe is made up of, we are made of the same components. That is a big deal, right? Because when you think about it, let's even look at it like this, right? You're your own Earth. You are your own planet. Matter of fact, you're made up of the same thing the planet is made up of as well, right? The human body is 70% water, 30% mass, and other things like that. We have an electromagnetic heartbeat, and we go on living our life, going to work and going to school or going to get our groceries and come back home. But we're revolving around other people each and every time we step out the door. The Earth is made up of mostly water, over 70% of water. The Earth has an electromagnetic field, and the electromagnetic field is something similar to the aura, right? That shines off of the Earth, the atmosphere, whatever you want to call it, but each person has this thing as well. And when you feel vibes or vibrations, right, or wavelengths of energy, whenever you are navigating around people or being around other people out in the world, and you get the vibe like, hey, I really like that person, or not, then we're understanding that there's other things at play. There's other molecular things going into play that are giving us these sensories around other people and objects that we may come in contact with. And you can do that on a larger scale as well, but as above, so below. I already told you that everything above is below. And it's the same thing, man. So if we are all the same components of the universe, and we're made of the same stuff that stars are made of, then how can't you be a star? Why aren't you a star? Why don't you have your own solar system of planets or other people revolving around you, making your world better? And this is what I'm here for. This is my purpose on life, to give to each and every one of you the insight into the true being that you really are and how powerful that you really are. And so we're gonna watch this video on the 7 Hermetic principles, the ones that I just spoke of, and let's get into it. Let's get a deeper insight into the 7 Hermetic principles. Let's get it.
The first principle from the Hermetic series is the principle of mentalism. Well, the concept that they're talking about is that our intelligence, our consciousness, our mental activity is what is actually creating the world that we live in. Well, that sounds like a really weird idea, but guess what? It is ultimate modern quantum physics. Even on the founding day of quantum physics in 1927, Max Planck, one of the founding fathers of this science, recognized that consciousness is creating our life experiences. How you are thinking and what you're believing and how you behave is actually manifesting the experiences we have in this world. Well, Planck gave us the idea that consciousness creates our life experiences. This idea from 1927 is as valid today as it was then. A recent article in the journal Nature, the most prestigious scientific journal on this planet, by Richard Conn Henry, a physicist from Johns Hopkins University, wrote an article entitled The Mental Universe. Well, I'm not going to go through all the details of the article because it's all summed up in the last sentence of the article. Quote, "The universe is immaterial. It's mental and spiritual. Live and enjoy." The concept that quantum physics has revealed is that our mental character is actually creating the world. Well, this is profoundly important just from a simple scientific point of view. For example, we talk about what we call the placebo effect. Someone has an illness, they take a drug that is told to them to be what they needed to heal themselves with, they take the drug, they get better. And then we find out that the drug they took was a sugar pill. So the question is then, what healed this person? And the answer was the positive thinking that resulted from the placebo effect. Well, guess what? There's a consequence of negative thinking. That's called the nocebo effect. And most of the illnesses on this planet can actually be really related back to negative consciousness. The nocebo effect is the opposite of the placebo effect. Yet both placebo and nocebo are mental constructions. And so basically what we have to understand is our thinking indeed is creating our world, and there's a difference between positive thinking and negative thinking. Geometry is the math that provides for structure in space. The geometry that we all took in school was called Euclidean geometry. If you remember, that's a geometry with squares and triangles, circles, pyramids, all these kinds of objects and structure in space. Well, it's very interesting because the Euclidean geometry is what we use to create our world today. The houses, the buildings, even the technology and electronics, etc., all comes down to understanding the geometry of a Euclidean nature. Okay? Well, here's the issue. Is there a geometry that makes a tree? Is there a geometry that makes a snail? Yes, there is. And it turns out it's called fractal geometry. It's a very simple equation. But here's the nature of the equation, that you solve the equation and you get an answer. But the neat part is now you take the answer and feed it back into the same equation, solve it again. You get another answer. Take that answer, feed it back in. It's an iteration. It's a repeat of the same pattern over and over again using, guess what? The same original formula. Since you're using the same equation, the patterns in the geometry repeat themselves at higher or lower levels of organization. So if you're trying to understand a pattern at a higher level of organization, then you could go back and look for the same pattern at a lower level of that mathematics, make sense out of it at the lower level, and then take that information and understand the higher level. It comes down to something you've heard your whole life. It's called as above, so below. So basically, it said you can see the structure of the universe in patterns that replicate in self-similar fashion at any level of organization. This very simple one that I work with all the time is cell biology. You can look at the human and say, look at all the functions in this human body. Well, that's very complex, 50 trillion cells. But guess what? In a single nucleated cell in your body, all the functions that you have in your body are already present in a cell. The cell has respiration, digestion, excretion. Cells even have an immune system. It's the same mechanism that's used in the higher organization, which is then a human body. In other words, there's a repetition in the structure from as above to below, not a new age idea, but a fundamental principle and fractal geometry. Now, an interesting point about it is, as far as we know, fractal geometry came into awareness in the 1980s with Mandelbrot. Well, obviously, 5,000 years ago, they obviously knew it as well, which then says, how smart are we, or how smart were the people that gave rise to us? This is an important part for looking at the nature of the Hermetic principles. The principle of vibration is so interesting because everything in the universe is moving all the time. It's always vibrating and moving. When quantum physics first looked at the atom, as the earlier physicists, they saw the physical structures of protons, neutrons, and electrons. But as they started to take it apart, they found out at the very bottom, there wasn't anything physical. It was a vortex of energy. You can visualize energy by taking a rock and dropping it into a pond. Well, the energy of the rock as it hits the water is translated into the pond water. What is the result? Ripples that radiate out, ripples and ripples radiating out. That is the shape of energy. The energy is a force who is shaping matter. It's the energy underneath the water. It's continuously vibrating. Waves and ripples come out of atoms. Atoms are spinning vortexes of energy, and in the process, they make waves, and these ripples go out into space. Everything in the known universe in regard to the physical experience is based on atoms, and all atoms are energy vortices with ripples that radiate out. Atoms are nano tornadoes. Well, let's consider then the real tornado. It's a spinning vortex of energy. Try and drive your car through a tornado. As you get to the tornado, the force field of that vibration can actually lift up your car and throw it away. Vortices of energies, nano tornadoes, have force fields to them. I can see a tornado. It's got all the debris and the dirt and the dust that's been picked up by the windstorm and thrown all around. If you take the dirt and dust out of the tornado, it's still an energy force field, even though now you can't see it. An energy force is invisible. but you can feel it because it will push on you, you push on it. That feels physical. As far as we know, the ancient people weren't talking quantum physics, but they obviously knew quantum physics because they understood the nature of the vibration. Even though they live in a world like we live in the world that appears to be physical, this ancient wisdom was built into the Hermetic principles. The Hermetic principle of polarity talks about the fact that there are opposites, but they're the same. How can they be opposites and be the same? Well, let's go back to the understanding of an atom. And I talked about the fact that an atom, you can see its action through the ripples in a pond. And it's sort of actually what is called a sine wave. And a sine wave goes up, and a sine wave goes down, and a sine wave goes up, and it goes down. But there's a midpoint. At the midpoint, if you look at the wave going up, we would say that's the positive. But when it goes back down to the midpoint and goes under the midpoint, that's the negative. So we talk about a graph with a line positive above, negative below. But guess what? The same ripple is positive for some part and then negative for the other part. Polarities represent an extension of a continuum. That on one side is one extreme of that continuum and the other side is the other extreme. They came from the same ripple that's going up and down. And so when we look at the world, we have a tendency to focus on the polarities, good, bad, night, day. All these different polarities that we have generated all represent the same. Day and night is a cycle. You can plot it. It's all the same. Can I separate day from night? No, you can't. They're all the same vibration. But this is important for us to understand because we have a tendency to move to one side of the polarity, move to the other side of the polarity, and this creates a problem in our world, especially when we divide, let's say, politics or any level of consciousness. We say this side says this and this side says that. They look like opposite sides, but the truth is they're all on the same wavelength. And the important part for us to understand is where should we be in this wave up and down? The midpoint. Because you say, well, that side was negative. If you erase it and don't put it into your picture and you only look at the positive side, you're not seeing the whole picture. You need to see both sides to make the picture. Life experiences reveal the polarity between good and bad. These are teachings. We learn what is good and what is bad, and we recognize they're all on the same emotional wavelength. This is not a modern concept. This is a concept from thousands of years ago, but makes sense in a world of quantum physics of the energy, the vibration, and the wavelength. So the Hermetic principles, again, were based on some knowledge way back then that we are in our current world finally recognizing. But it brings up an interesting fact. How do they know all this back 5,000 years ago? In the Hermetic principle dealing with rhythm, recognize this very simple fact. All atoms are actually energy vibrations. Well, a vibration has a rhythm. There's an up phase and a down phase, and an up phase and a down phase. Well, this rhythm can also be present in our life. There are times when you're in harmony with it going up, and these are the good feeling times, these are great. And there are times when we seem to be out of harmony, but that's because the rhythm is going down in the opposite polarity. So the point about the rhythm is, if you can choose and you can engage, then you can ride the rhythm and then make your life smooth rather than abrupt changes of good, bad, good, bad. It's a flow, it's a wavelength. Historically, this wavelength characterizes much of the history of this planet. So the original people, the indigenous people, they understood the rhythm. They lived in the balance. They lived in the middle part, so that their lives were living in harmony. It's interesting because in our social evolution, we started at balance, went to spirituality with polytheism, then ultimate spirituality, monotheism, and then there was a revolt, and it's called the Protestant Reformation, And they started to say, well, wait, maybe matter isn't as bad as the church was claiming it was, because the church was at the top of the pole, the bottom of the pole was matter, and the church said, well, that stuff at the bottom is not good. And then that wave started to come back down toward the middle. We crossed the middle. It's called deism, the belief of nature and God being the same thing. Nature being the physical reality, God being the spiritual reality, and deism said they're both the same thing. Well, interestingly, that deism is the foundational principle of the United States when it was first formed by the founding fathers. But it's a wave. It didn't stop at the midpoint. Well, as the wave started to go in the material realm, we started to let go of the spiritual realm. That matter now becomes the most important thing. Well, we let go of the spiritual, so where does life come from in the material world? And the answer they came up with was genes. Genes represented the source of the physical experience. And then all of a sudden we say, yep, spirit's not necessary, we've got genes. There was a point where people said, there's something more than the physical realm. And they started to look at healing in a different way. They started to recognize that you could heal with energy. You could heal with consciousness. The people started to say, yeah, but that's the invisible part. The material realm started to transition back into what? That there's a spiritual realm that we've left out of the story. So if you understand, we pull back and look at the flow. The flow is what? A sine wave. And a sine wave shows us there's an up and a down and an up and a down. But the sine wave is the example of rhythm, that you put both of them together and then you can make a vibration that goes up and down like that. So again, the whole principle is coming back at this point. So the point of cause and effect is actions cause reactions. But reactions then alter the original cause of the first action. So it doesn't have one cycle, it's repetitious the whole time. Everything is action, reaction, action, reactions. If you want to understand how in the universe you see something moving, you automatically know there must have been something that pushed it in the first place to move. So the basic understanding of cause and effect, action, reaction is built into our world of view and our world understanding. Well, sometimes this might be applied misdirectly. A scientist by the name of Michael Denton started to look at the universe and started to recognize that the waves of interaction of all the things in the universe lead to a cause of a creation. Well, the idea that there is a creation led some people to say, well, if there's a creation, there's a creator. And, well, what's God to a lot of people? The energy. The universe, everything that is. But they make that energy into a person. The white bearded guy up in the sky is the physical creator. I say, no, but perceiving that there's a creation, they automatically, with the idea of cause and effect, use that principle to say, well, there must be a cause. So what we're really beginning to understand in the world of quantum physics is that everything is energy. Well, energies interact with energies. A thought is a creative energy. You can create a thought, but that thought being an energy can alter the physical reality of yourself even. So your thoughts being broadcast are a cause, but the energy of the thought engages with the energy of the atoms of your body and are manifest as an experience, cause and effect. That just simplifies why the biology belief is so important, because your consciousness is a cause that results in an effect as perceived in your body. So from the wave of an atom to the intelligence of the human, it's all been divided into what we have perceived and labeled as male and female, but recognizing all organisms have both characteristics. In a cell, they have both energies. A cell cannot live with just male characteristics or with just female characteristics. So what's the difference? Male characteristics are associated with structure and movement. Female characteristics are associated with vegetation and reproduction. In other words, growth, and this is support. Both support and growth are in every present cell. You have the support part, which is your skeleton, in fact. That's a big deal, the muscles and the skeleton. But you have the vegetative part. Well, those are the organs of the gut that are taking care of the metabolism, cleaning up the system. Over the evolution, the cell started to split because of differentiation of function. And one cell says, okay, I'll handle the support, but I can only work with it if you handle the vegetative. So it took both the male and female, but you have to work them together. And the significance about this is even in the cell, both of them are there, but it's even in the human. In the human, we have both a female and male characteristic to it. And the simplest one is just look at the brain. There's a line right down the middle of the brain. That line separates what are called the hemispheres, left and right. Well, they're totally two different functions. The left hemisphere is associated with intellectual thinking and stuff like that. The right hemisphere is associated with emotion. Gender plays an important role, but then also recognize this, just like polarity that we talked about before, it's all on the same wavelength. They're not separate from each other. Both are required. Emphasize the left, more intellectual. Emphasize the right, more emotional. And then label them as what? Male, intellectual, female, emotional. They were the same thing. They were always a continuum of the same thing. There is a difference in gender, yes, but we have created an artificial separation of that through the programming that we acquire in the first 7 years of our life. Human programming has caused a separation. You want to understand how to live in harmony? Go back and recognize each of the principles in the Hermetic series, because when you put them all together, it is a guide for us to thrive into the future. And it's interesting because
hey man, you get it right. You win on that one. You did that one. You win. What's up? How'd y'all feel about that? I wanted to make sure that I found out the mic levels. Hold on. How'd y'all feel about that? So I wanted to make sure that I played the whole video this time because of each of the principles that were being named and how in depth this speaker was going. So he said a lot of things that was very instrumental, even something that I just learned along the way, the deism, the belief in nature and God is the same thing. So that was pretty cool because I didn't think of things that way. But when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense when the first law being that everything is mentalism. And if God is the energy or the mental, because the mental plane is running off of energy, then that impregnates the physical world to manifest physical things, or seemingly. Because just like humans have thoughts, and when we emanate those thoughts into the world, we can manifest physical things that come into our lives, or hence the creation of a baby, then we understand the spiritual versus the physical aspect, or the duality of the same thing. So keeping that in mind, we have to remember that we impregnate upon our world the things that we want to be in it. So hence, when you hear that, your mind can be a prison, then it's because we create the foundation of everything that is around us to create those walls, whether they're based on beliefs or blocks that we cannot get past in life, or past traumas that we're dealing with that cause us to believe that there are actually physical restraints from keeping us from moving forward in life. When in all actuality, we're the ones creating those physical blocks from mental creation. It's pretty deep. So many other things that he spoke about, and one thing that I like to think about is the 1 day for 1 year theory. So 1 day is 1 year. It's the equivalent of 1 year if you think of things from the macrocosm and the microcosm, the big universe and the small universe, the cellular level against the grand level in the galaxy that we live in. There's 24 hours in 1 day. On an even day, there's 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night, right? And in those two patterns of the day, we have sunlight and we have sunset. Now, if we're following the belief of as above, so below, and that everything that happens on a large scale happens on a small scale, then you can understand how one day is equivalent to 1 year, because in 1 year we have 12 months. Out of those 12 months, 6 months out of the year, we have what's considered to be spring and summer, which is the light, right? Which is the sun coming into the longest days of the year. And then from fall and winter, we have night, or the shortest days of the year, leading all the way down into winter. So half of a year, half of a day, still nighttime, and the other half still daytime. So when you think about it from that level, the 1 year for 1 day thing, then you need to be able to accomplish a lot more in your 24 hours, right? In your day, right? Now that we know that if we just keep putting in small daily deposits on a daily level, that we can sustain ourselves to be successful on a yearly basis because of the things that we're doing daily. So if you're working out certain times of days a week, then you're going to reap the benefits of that, because you're going to gain weight. So it's the same thing, right? Make small daily deposits and it'll help you throughout the year, but you could do that all in 1 day, if that makes any sense at all. Just wanted to throw that out there for you, just to scramble your mind a little bit. But nonetheless, with that being said, it's all for you to realize that the power that you have inside of you is all of the power that you need to succeed, to be successful. You have it all inside of yourself. I hope you meditated today. I hope you took at least 5 minutes to yourself today. If you didn't do that, what are you doing? You have to take some time and just to reflect on your day. I'm not saying sit back and stress about everything that's going on in your life, but you can simply observe the things that are going on in your life. Breathe in and breathe out, and it too shall pass. Because everything passes. It comes and goes, and if we learn anything from the Hermetic principles, do we know that when you force things, it just won't happen, because when you're forcing something, it's going the other way. Right? The ebb and flow, that rhythm, the cause and effect. So we have to come to a place where we don't either ebb or flow. We're just existing. One thing that I like to do when I get upset is just feel the emotion, because you can't stop from feeling angry, upset, or maybe frustrated at times. But what you can do is observe the feeling and don't react to it. That's when taking those breaths are, very important, and just understanding that this too will pass. It's a good way to get through situations without reacting adversely to them. Little things that I like to do in my time. But hey, who am I? I'm just a little cell, little organism on this large planet trying to exist. But along the way, I want to help the few people that I can to exist better. And together we can create a better world, because we're making the people around us better, which is ultimately making us better. So that's another one. It's the worthy one, never the two. How could I be two when I'm number one? The hottest under the sun. The hottest. But we're going to see y'all real soon here on the Worthy Network. I hope this was a good episode. And with that being said, another one.